Topic number 2, how about Power Slap? There is a little bit more in the news. I'll double check to see if there's another up today, whatever it is. We have 2 pieces of information I want to share with you. BC, I'm going to go in separate order from what we have in the rundown. I'd like to show you mine first. So I follow Eric Spicely on Twitter. He's a UFC veteran. Actually has a win over Thiago Santos, if you can believe it, back in the day. Hasn't really fought in UFC in some time, and I'm not even sure if he's fought in MMA in some time. But he tweeted something kind of interesting, that he was contacted, basically, by the Power Slap League to see if he wanted to participate. And he was like, you'd be shocked about how much it pays. And then what he said was first fight was 2K. So I shot him a DM and I'm like, are you sure this was Dana White's Power Slap League? And it was. He showed me some evidence from some text messages that he had received from the people who were booking the show. And I got to take a look at them. Sure enough, it was them. Now, he later clarified to Steven Morocco of MMA Fighting that was for just that bout. Like, I guess the show would be booked for 3. So the pay would somehow, for a full day of all of the fights, come out to something around, give or take, 10K, something like that. But for the first one, 2 and 2. BC, your reaction to the pay scale?
I mean, it's and here's 2 words for you, Luke. Fucking ridiculous. And it's like, not that I think, these athletes should be paid a ton for what this is, which is just barbaric comedy, but it's not funny at the end of the day. Like, it's absurd and it's stupid. And it's just violence for the sake of it. But, because it's just violence for the sake of it and you can't even bring defense into it. I almost feel like they should be paid more, but then a lot more, right? But then UFC's got a problem. What are you going to overpay your power slappers in comparison to your actual fighters that you're underpaying? Look, here's the best way I can say this of what a hypocritical decision this was to try to put this out as UFC owners and like we mentioned, using the UFC promotional vehicle to do that. This is the equivalent of if UFC was so vocal about women's rights, let's say, because to be fair, they capitalized on what was going on in Strikeforce with Carano and Cyborg and Rousey and built a women's division around that. And you look back and you go, good on UFC, right? Like, there's been some good, but imagine if they were like big proponents of women's rights and all of that and actively did that. And then they also, instead of Power Slap, launched like their own porn company. You know what I mean? Like, it just, and the rumors were that, that they're getting into the sex trade and that things aren't looking good. That's the exact same message that I feel like this whole thing sends to the fighters. And, all this, we do all these things to protect their safety, but, in our other vehicle, we're going to promote this absolute bullshit. Like, it just disgusts me. I'm shocked that this is going to go to a second episode. I really am. Could you have a more toxic product at the moment? And for every possible reason, obviously the Dana White New Year's Eve thing takes it to a new level, but I love that. Like I said, I love that more fighters are actually tweeting about this. A couple of them that they're just like, what the hell? This isn't a sport. What the hell are we doing here? But this is the true character of Dana White, of the Fertittas who back this financially, and maybe even, Ari and Endeavor, you know what I mean? Like, this is the character that they're showing by being affiliated with this. So what do I find out? What do I think when I see on top of that? Oh yeah, we're offering 2 and 2 for you to take. I mean, look, did you see that video I tweeted out from Chris Nowinski, if I said his last name correctly, the former WWE wrestler who now, heads up all that research for brain health? He's telling you in the highlights from the first episode, that right there, you see the way that guy fell right there? Like, that's permanent brain damage right there. You know what I mean? And so 2 and 2. Yeah. Seems about right. UFC, right? Seems about right, Dana. That's how you do it. That's how you do things. That's how you do things. It's been monstrously successful, but that's how you do things. And I feel like finally, not only is the curtain being pulled back, and sometimes it's only being pulled back because of like the John S. Nashes and the people that, the guy from MMA, MMA analytics there who's just going ham on a lot of these inside things. Some of us that were smarter already knew a lot of this stuff, but to see it all just kind of be unearthed at the same time. And then you have this giant, thing that we're all worshiping here, this Power Slap League that you're putting out there. It's like they are telling you exactly who the fuck they are. And they're grimy and gross as shit. So 2000 to win. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. And man,
listen. They were never. Hold on a sec. They were never going to. They were never going. Remember, think about the vehicle that they're using here, right? It's a television show. You need to be able to make affordable TV. Like for folks who may not know, I mean, everyone knows this, but like BC and I have worked at the fringes of TV. We've had a little bit of TV work, and here's one thing BC and I can definitely tell you, even just being on the small TV gigs that we've had over the years. Although your Showbox gig is quite nice, BC, but you know what I'm about to say is true. Listen, budgets can dictate a lot, but there are going to be people, especially around reality programming, they're going to want to make that programming as cheap as they can. Right? That's a big sell to the network. A big sell to the network is, how much is it going to cost for me to make 8 episodes of this? How much is the actual budget? They were never going to do slap fighting because it was expensive. They're going to do it because it's cheap. It's affordable TV. It's easy to get these guys to sign, because probably $2K for slapping, or $4K if you win, or whatever it ends up being. For the actual slapping side of it, I have no idea what the industry pays. I'm going to guess that that's reasonably competitive with it. And by the way, for people who compete on reality TV, 2K or 10K for a day, is not necessarily a small sum either. But this is the point. Brain damage shouldn't be this cheap. Now, of course, on the regional scene or for up and coming boxing, there's really nothing you can do. But when you're around people that actually do have money, people who do have money should not be able to buy brain damage for cheap. It should be expensive, right? That to me seems like a real basic way to examine whether or not there's something that you're looking at is ethical. It's like, are rich people paying for this at what it should be, or at some bargain basement version of it? And if it's a bargain basement version of it, and you can see there's obviously brain damage associated with it when there doesn't need to be, that's the only red flag that you really need. This is very, very cheap brain damage that they can sell to networks as an overall cheap experience. And that was partly the reason why, BC, it may not be canceled right away, because it probably was not very expensive to produce. They're not paying these guys a lot. Dude, half the stuff, whatever is at the UFC Apex, they don't have to pay for any of that. It's cheap to produce. It's cheap. So all they have to do is sell ads against it, and they might be able to make their money back on this.
Yeah, look, I don't expect them. It's like not only I'm not surprised, mother effer, at how low it was based on what we already know, but yeah, to your point on budgets, you couldn't expect it. It's like, man, I hope someone I love doesn't get into the adult film industry, Luke, but if they do, I hope they make a ton of money, and maybe there is the money to pay out in there, and this power slap bullshit, there's not. But the thing that gets me the most upset about the news that you shared there on Twitter, and it was one of the things when this thing was first launched, we were like, oh man, please don't tell me that this is going to be, UFC's way of looking at the combat sports market, seeing the success that some UFC veterans, when their time is up physically, have outside of it, whether it's BKFC for a big paycheck or boxing Jake Paul, and thinking, oh, well, I could jump in that market too. I remember saying it when this was first conceived. If this ends up being Diego Sanchez and, insert any other name showing up at the Power Slap League, because that's just where the biggest, the next payday at the moment is here in retirement. I'm going to throw up in my mouth and, and smear all over the screen here, Luke, on the TV, because are you telling me that they went out of they're now recruiting Spice Lee and ex-UFC fighters?
By the way, who had noteworthy brain trauma issues following the end of his MMA career, or certainly the end of his UFC run.
This is where it goes too far.
It wasn't even a guy who had not much damage issues. He had documented damage issues.
And it's hard, dude, I'm going to be honest. It's hard to take a big soapbox thing here in general when we all are combat sports fanatic maniacs. We make a living off it. We make a great living, all that stuff. And I get, the difference is defense, and the difference is, there's a lot of differences, right? But even that generic, well, you guys are in this sport, that's, as we talk about, is hard to deal with on a regular basis too. The risks and the damage. This is a sport in which it's enhanced by the millions of the expected damage that you're going to take, and now they're recruiting their ex-fighters who may bring in some level of name value or toughness, right, to do the same thing. Luke, if it gets to this point where we're actually seeing ex-UFC fighters show up on the show, and you're an active UFC fighter, and you're not willing to go, okay, maybe this is finally the last straw in terms of us interlocking arms. We don't need Bjorn Rebney necessarily, but we may need to take a stand in terms of our overall treatment together. Again, not the media's job, but I feel like the media is the only one that's talking about it because we're all just grossed out, Luke. But I mean, is that the level? You know what I mean? Is that if you start seeing like Mark Coleman coming out of retirement and getting in the slap league game, Luke, is that where the fighters should be showing up outside the Apex with pickets signs and trying to be like, look, enough is enough here?
Yeah, or more, just realize like what you might be looking at your future too. That's what I mean. Just think about how just think about that. If you're actually trying to recruit previous fighters who may not have competed in a while or whatever, I'm sure they would say, yeah, they don't want the opportunity, don't take it. But what you're really trying to do is get them for, a modest amount of money that they might need. One never knows. So they're not making an economically, impartial decision. They're making one that could be a little bit more based out of necessity. And then the whole idea is doing what you did for Shogun, feeding him to somebody new. In this case, feeding him to power slappers who might have some kind of structural advantage or just, from an industry standpoint have done this more. They're going to be better at it. That seems to be a reasonable conclusion. And now you can say, oh, you got beat a UFC fighter on your resume, right? It's like refeeding them to get the other population then spruced up and looked better.
It's Soylent Green, Luke.
It's
Soylent Green.
It's a gross business. Hold on, we have one more piece.
People, Luke. It's made out of people. Spoiler alert. Great movie, right? Soylent Green. That's what this is becoming. Okay.
So we have one more piece here. I didn't pull this. I'm not sure what it is, but I know John Morgan of Sports Illustrated, previously MMA Junkie, spoke to Frank. I believe his name is Lamicella, who is actually a Zuffa attorney that they just randomly turned into the head of Power Slap. He had an interview with him. Let me hear some of this. We'll react to it.
Well, I think, that is this a sport conversation online goes on with everything, right? Is bowling a sport? Is pool a sport? Is this a sport? At the end of the day, you have two athletes competing, right? You talk to them, they absolutely feel like it's a sport.
No, you don't.
They absolutely feel like they are training and working hard. And you'll start seeing that in the episodes with the coaches, right? Where they actually train technique, work out in the gym. So listen, I think what you saw in episode 1 was just the surface. And what you'll continue to see is even more improvement in these athletes and more improvement over, the way the matches are run. On the no defense, I mean, there's no evasive defense. If your definition of defense is only evasion, then that's obviously got some element of truth to it.
Or blocking.
However, again, talking to these guys, there is definitely defense. There is training the head, neck, shoulder muscles, and our sports science and sports data that we put out will start to support that. Learning how tense to make the muscles, how tense to clench the jaw, all of that matters. Learning to roll with the slap, but not committing a flinching foul. So there's really a lot of time, when do you close your eyes? Do you leave your eyes open the whole time? So there are elements. And then on the striker side, again, back to the health and safety point, part of the rules were built to limit force where we can, right? So the feet have to stay grounded. There's no stepping or pivoting. Watch a boxer; everything is thrown with a pivot, right? There's no.
Okay, I mean, I've seen enough of this. We can call it there. This is BC. We are at the point now where we've got someone who went to law school, right? Right. This is not a person who ever engaged in these behaviors once. Like I have a feeling that attorney Frank Lamicella, didn't have a lifelong passion for slapping. He was just hired by Zuffa and then forced into this role, and he has to pretend that all of this is real. And then we're at the point now, by the way, which, tells you have every right to be cynical about anyone in power's motives. But just to put a bow on the whole thing, BC, we're at the point now where we're like, should you close your eyes or not? And this is supposed to be constitutive of effective and important defense. Get the fuck out of here, Frank.
Dude,
what are you talking about?
You know how every time a fighter in a combat sports gets here's some harsh analysis against them from a pundit like us who don't have pro or amateur fights, and the knee-jerk reaction is, okay, but you don't know. And to a certain degree, there's only some things we do and don't know because of that. I fully agree. You've done actual training in some degree. I've done minuscule boxing training, but enough to get a taste of it. But no, I don't know the day-to-day. I usually think that's a bullshit take. In Power Slap, though, if you want to look at that guy's video and say, I can't listen to that guy until I see him take one of those power slaps. It's like, I feel like that should be a prerequisite. If you're going to make money off of this, Luke, you should at least go in there and have to have it done to you. And then we'll see if you want to continue down here describing it as a sport. Luke, I thought John Morgan was with MMA Underground. Is that linked with Sports Illustrated?
Yes, they're connected. So a lot of his work, right. I say Sports Illustrated, I'm not sure who he gets credentialed through. But yes, he's with the UG / Sports Illustrated because they have a partnership. They have a
John did that interview, and I think our producers edited out the question. I don't know John's take on this, but he did offer it up as like, hey, some would say that this isn't a sport because there's no defense. What is your thoughts on that? I don't know where John stands on that, but have we had a media member that has been like, Power Slap's not that bad, guys. Like, you should probably check it out. Has it happened yet? Or has it just been
you know what? I think there were a couple before Dana White had his controversy that were like, okay, I definitely saw, you know what, which is fine. I understand this. If this is your view pre Dana White's incident, I get it, which was, you know what? I'm not going to judge a book by its cover. I'm at least going to go see what it's about, and then I'll make a decision. Okay. I can. That's hard to get mad at someone for that. I mean, that's just doing due diligence. To me, it's a little bit, slightly gullible, but fine. I wouldn't die on that hill. But then after Dana White had his thing, I just saw people being like kind of repulsed by the whole thing.
I can't
which
see
is
why
not exactly the same as having like a principled stance against Power Slap, more just being kind of gross. But